entertaining angels unawares. Well, you may be wondering why it's a little sparse. You've got a little extra room in the pews today. Everybody did not go to the Carolina game and the Clemson game, although a number did. This has been parish weekend at Camp St. Christopher, and so this is one of those times of the year when we actually have 4 services today. Those of us who are down at Camp St. Christopher, the choir, many are there. It's been a wonderful weekend with all the rain yesterday. But they're reading morning prayer at St. Christopher, and we had our final summer Sunday at Grace Chapel this morning at 9 o'clock down in Rockville, and so this is a wonderful example of kind of the people of St. John's are all over the Sea Islands today. Let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Hospitality, it is that imperative to the people of God. It is a growing and emerging call for us here at St. John's. We think about times in our lives, and I invite you to think about a time in your life or times in your life when you've been the recipient of true, deep, generous hospitality. When have you been welcomed with a certain care that you maybe needed at that particular time? How did it make you feel? I'll never forget when I always think about this. Some years ago, I was helping this priest with a Bible school, and I was not ordained yet, and so I arrived. It was one of those evening Bible schools that ran during the week, and so I arrived at the church. It was the afternoon. He and I were setting up, and I had not received the sacrament. I'd not received Holy Communion for a while, and so and I'm such a believer too in the importance of the sacrament in our lives, that it brings us healing and strength when we need it, and we are Catholic Christians. We believe this, and we believe in the real presence. And so I asked this priest if he would give me communion, and all of a sudden he began to vest. He put on his white alb, he put on his stole and his chasuble, and I said, no, oh, and I was embarrassed. I said, I didn't mean to trouble you. And he just continued to preparing the sacrament for me and said, a banquet is a banquet. A banquet is a banquet. It didn't matter that it was one lone young woman trying to do the Lord's work who hadn't had the sacrament in a while, or whether it's the multitudes that we're serving and welcoming. A banquet is a banquet. When have you received such hospitality? And how often we have here the opportunity to extend it. I could spend every day, all day, just wandering around our church yard, because there are other people wandering around our church yard. And they're people, yes, but they're special people. They're pilgrims in search of welcome. We know that we feel better ourselves when we are serving in such a way, don't we? There was an article just the other day in the Wall Street Journal, and this was an article by a self-described expert on stress, a stress physiologist. Okay, I had not heard of that term, but that's the description. Somebody that studies the impacts of stress, and we know that there's always stress in the world and in our lives. And so this person talked about a trip that she had taken to Hawaii, and how on that trip she found herself in need, and how various persons extended hospitality and care to her. The author mentioned a recent study about this sort of thing that revealed a startling truth. And the study that the author cites is of 90 different stress reduction strategies tested in corporate settings, that only one constantly mitigated the negative effects of stress. And that is serving others. Of the 90, only one. All these other things that many of us do and are important, but the one, serving others. We do know this, don't we, on some level? We know it. We know it. It's the example of Jesus. We know that if we want to move beyond ourselves, we must step outside of ourselves. I had the opportunity to do that yesterday. As I said, we were down at Camp St. Christopher on Seabrook Island from Friday night till today, and I had a funeral at Grace Chapel in Rockville. Yesterday morning, I had a funeral, and so I had a wonderful plan. If you know your Sea Island geography around here, you know that if you're driving and you're heading to Seabrook, that right after the roundabout, Bohicket Marina is to the right. So across the creek and the marsh, a vast expanse of marsh, is Rockville, the village of Rockville. Very, very close. You can see it, so close. If you're to drive it, however, from way down at Camp St. Christopher, it's about an hour on a good day. Well, you may know yesterday was a rainy day. You may have noticed that. And so I had a plan that somebody was going to pick me up in a boat, and we were going to just go maybe 10 minutes, maybe. Traveling slowly so as not to get my vestments wet and all that. You know, it was all planned out. Well, that was a wash, naturally. It was a wash. And so one of the things that causes me a little bit of stress is driving in blinding rain. I just don't like to do it. And if I don't have to do it, I'm going to wait till it lightens up and slackens up a bit. But this funeral was at 11, and so I just put on my glasses and hit the accelerator and went on to Rockville. Piece of cake. No stress. Because God's grace allowed me in that moment when I had to do something I didn't want to do, that I'd worked really hard not to have to do, we're given the grace and the strength to do what we need to do. And it turned out to be a wonderful day and a beautiful funeral and all of that. And for God's people, hopefully, were served. But I just share that example, that we have these examples in our own lives all the time, don't we? And so if we can just get out of our own minds sometimes and do the thing that's right in front of us, that we're called to do in that moment that generally involves serving in some way another person, how much happier we are and settled we are. So this author in this article, it goes on to say that in a world obsessed with self-optimization and individual wellness solutions, the most radical act might be the simplest one. Noticing when someone needs help and then providing it. So simple, the gospel message that we're given today, and by so doing, we may perhaps even be entertaining angels unawares. Amen.